Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we walk through the case of a haunting disappearance that sits at the intersection of a personal mystery and a national tragedy.
Yeah, this one. It's probably one of the most confounding cases tied to 9/11. You're looking at a story with, well, basically two completely different narratives pulling against each other.
Right. You've got the immense chaos of that day, September 11th.
And then you have the sort of quiet personal turmoil happening just before. It's a real collision.
A missing doctor, a vanished night out, and the morning the world changed forever. Was Dr. Sneha Philip a victim of 9/11, or did her disappearance begin long before the towers fell? I mean, that question, it's been hanging over this case for, what, over 20 years now?
Absolutely. It's plagued her family, investigators, everyone who looks into it, the ambiguity. It's really the heart of the whole thing.
So let's set the scene. We're talking about Dr. Sneha Ann Philip. She was 31.
31, yes. An Indian-American physician and internal medicine resident, living with her husband, Dr. Ron Lieberman, in Battery Park City.
And their apartment, 225 Rector Place, that was incredibly close to the World Trade Center.
Literally blocks away, which of course becomes central to everything. When you look at her last known movements, September 10th, maybe early September 11th, the sheer scale of what happened next, the attacks, it just swallowed everything. Any potential evidence, any clues about where she was just vanished into the chaos. It created this void.
A void that the official processes, the legal system, have really struggled to deal with ever since.
Exactly.
So today, our goal is to really unpack the evidence, look at both sides. The official ruling that she died in the attacks and the reasons why that ruling wasn't straightforward.
And we absolutely have to explore the personal context, her life situation at the time, the difficulties she was facing. Because those personal struggles are key to understanding why alternative theories about her fate even exist and why they persist.
It's crucial, isn't it? Because the final legal decision gave a form of closure, but like you said, it didn't magically solve all the factual questions.
Not at all. The mystery remains.
Okay, let's start unpacking the case then. Let's begin with what we do know about her life and the confirmed events leading up to when she disappeared.
All right. So, Dr. Sneha Ann Philip, 31, Indian-American doctor, doing her residency in internal medicine, living, as we said, right near what became Ground Zero. That location just colors everything.
It really does. And her official status? That's complicated right from the start.
Very complicated. She was eventually declared a victim of 9/11 in 2008, but that came only after a really contentious legal fight.
Right. And why was it contentious?
Because of the evidence, or rather, the complete lack of physical evidence. Her body was never found. No remains, no DNA match, no personal belongings recovered from the rubble at the World Trade Center site that could definitively place her there. Nothing.
Wow. So no forensic link at all. That must be why investigators initially looked elsewhere.
Precisely. They had to consider other possibilities. But before we dive into the speculation, let's nail down the timeline for Monday, September 10th, 2001. Her day. It was already stressful, even before the evening.
How so?
Well, she had a mandatory court appearance that day, an arraignment.
Okay, what was that about?
It wasn't minor. She was facing a misdemeanor charge for falsely reporting an incident. Apparently, it stemmed from an earlier situation where she'd accused a restaurant worker of sexual assault, but the accusation was later deemed unfounded by authorities. That led to the charge against her.
Okay, that's significant. That tells you something about the pressure she was under, personally and legally.
Absolutely. It paints a picture of mounting stress. And, it does make the idea that maybe she wanted to escape it all seem, well, slightly less far-fetched to some people later on.
That context is vital. What else happened that day? There was an online chat, wasn't there?
Yes. Later that day, she chatted online with her mother. And during that chat, Sneha mentioned wanting to visit Windows on the World.
The restaurant at the top of the North Tower.
Exactly. It was just a casual mention, apparently. But looking back after the attacks, it took on this huge significance. It offered a possible reason for her to be near, or even in, the World Trade Center complex.
A potential destination. Okay, so now we move into the evening of September 10th. The last time anyone can say for sure that was her. Where and when was that?
That's the surveillance footage from the Century 21 department store. You know, the one, it was right near the WTC.
Yeah, I know it.
The timestamp on that footage is 7:08 p.m., September 10th. That is the last solid confirmed sighting of Dr. Sneha Philip.
And what she bought there is kind of mundane, but also strangely revealing, maybe?
It is intriguing. The list itself.
Yeah.
Lingerie, a pair of shoes, and some bed linens.
Okay. Lingerie
Correct.
maybe suggests plans for an evening or a trip.
Yeah.
Linens, maybe settling in, setting up a home.
Exactly. It feels domestic. It points towards, well, future plans. Maybe reconciliation in her marriage, perhaps a fresh start. It definitely doesn't scream, I'm about to run away forever or I'm heading into danger.
It feels like someone planning for the next day or the next week.
Right. And the way she paid is also critical.
How so?
She used her husband, Ron Lieberman's American Express card. And this is a crucial forensic cutoff point. That specific card, and apparently none of her other credit cards or bank accounts, were ever used again after that 7:88 p.m. purchase.
Never again.
Never again. Which makes the voluntary disappearance theory, well, difficult. How do you start a new life, especially as a doctor, with zero money, zero access to funds?
That financial silence is a pretty big hurdle for that theory. Okay, so that transaction ends the confirmed part of the timeline. Now we enter the really gray area, the early hours of September 11th, 2001, before the attacks. There are clues suggesting she did make it home after shopping, right?
Yes. Two main pieces of evidence, though both are debated. The first is a phone call.
Okay.
Around 4 a.m. on Tuesday morning, September 11th, a call was placed from the landline in their apartment, 225 Rector Place.
The apartment landline. Okay. Who did it call?
It called her husband Ron's cell phone. He wasn't home at the time, apparently. Due to their marital issues, they were sometimes staying separately.
Did he answer?
No, the call was very brief, unanswered. But the critical point is the origin. If the landline was used, the thinking goes, Sneha must have been physically back in the apartment sometime between that Century 21 trip at 7 p.m. and 4 a.m.
She must have come home, dropped off the shopping bags.
That's the inference, yes. That she was back in the apartment in the early morning hours.
Okay, so that puts her potentially home at 4 a.m. Then there's a second clue, much closer to the attacks, the sighting at 8:43 a.m. This one seems incredibly frustrating.
It is. It's tantalizingly close to the first impact. Lobby surveillance video from her building, 225 Rector Place, catches something at 8:43 a.m.
Just 3 minutes before the first plane hit the North Tower.
Exactly. 3 minutes.
Yeah.
The footage shows a woman who physically resembles Sneha, similar height, build, dark hair, entering the lobby from the street.
Okay.
And then almost immediately she turns around and walks right back out, leaves the building.
If that was Sneha, leaving her apartment 3 minutes before the world changed forever, just heading out the door.
Precisely. And critically, the woman in this footage, she isn't carrying the shopping bags from Century 21.
Suggesting they were indeed dropped off sometime earlier in the apartment.
Correct, which supports the idea she was home, at least for a while. But the big problem.
They couldn't be 100% sure it was her.
Exactly. The video quality, typical for 2001 CCTV, just wasn't clear enough for a definitive identification. Similar build, similar hair, but no clear face shot. So the NYPD couldn't officially say, yes, that was Dr. Philip at 8:43 a.m. Remains an unconfirmed possibility.
Which leaves this massive unanswered question. If she was home at 4 a.m. and if that was her at 8:43 a.m., why was she leaving again right then, just as the morning commute was starting?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was she just popping out for coffee?
Yeah.
Meeting someone, going back to Century 1 for some reason. We just don't know.
And if that wasn't her, then where was she between 4 a.m. and 8:43 a.m.?
Well, that opens up entirely different lines of inquiry. But the possibility that she was out on the street at 8:43 a.m. near the towers, just before impact, that leads directly into why the NYPD initially resisted the idea she was purely a 9/11 victim. They had to look at other scenarios.
Okay, let's explore those other scenarios, the non-9/11 theories. Because as you mentioned, her personal life at that time, it was complicated. There were factors that fueled these alternative ideas.
Yeah, you really can't understand the investigation without acknowledging the difficulties she was facing. They were significant.
Professionally, for instance.
Professionally, she was in serious trouble. She had been suspended from her hospital residency program. She was on a required leave of absence.
Why? What were the reasons given?
The official records mention things like chronic lateness, performance issues, and significantly documented problems related to alcohol use. For a doctor in residency, that's, well, it's potentially career-ending. a huge source of stress.
And then you add the legal trouble on top of that, the misdemeanor charge for false reporting we talked about earlier.
Right. So you have professional pressure, legal pressure.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of someone really struggling.
Which, for some people looking at the case, made the idea of simply running away seem plausible.
Plausible, or at least possible. Then you add in the reports of significant marital problems. Strain in her marriage with Ron Lieberman.
We know he wasn't staying at the apartment that night.
Right. Sources indicated they've been arguing, that the marriage was under real stress. So you put it all together, the job problems, the legal charge, the marriage issues, and it creates this fertile ground for what became known as the voluntary disappearance theory.
The theory that she saw the unprecedented chaos of 9/11 unfolding and just took the opportunity.
Used it as cover, a chance to vanish, start a new life somewhere else, knowing she'd likely be presumed dead in the attacks, lost among the thousands of missing.
It's a dramatic idea, but if someone felt trapped.
The dark thought, but you can see the logic perhaps, if someone felt truly desperate. However,
We come back to that financial wall.
we do. How does a doctor, someone with skills and presumably some resources, actually do that? Start over instantly with no money, no credit cards, no ID likely. It would require incredible, almost impossible pre-planning, or you have to question the theory itself.
Okay, so if voluntary disappearance seems unlikely due to the lack of resources, that leads investigators down a darker path, the criminal foul play theory.
Yes. This was something the NYPD had to seriously investigate, especially in the early days. The theory here is that Sneha met with harm before the attacks, sometime during the night of September 10th or the very early hours of September 11th.
And the timeline allows for that possibility.
Absolutely. Look at the gaps. There's roughly 7 hours between her being seen at Century 21 at 7:18 p.m. and that 4 a.m. phone call from the apartment landline.
A big window.
A very big window. And then another gap between 4 a.m. and that potential unconfirmed sighting at 8:43 a.m. Given her known personal struggles, the stress, the potential alcohol issues mentioned in her work records, investigators had to consider if maybe she met someone that night, went somewhere, got into a dangerous situation.
Could she have encountered someone in the city? Or could something have happened closer to home?
Both were possibilities. Could she have met someone while out? Yes. Could foul play have occurred near or even inside her apartment building? That also had to be considered, especially if you doubt the 4 a.m. phone call's meaning or if you believe the woman 8:43 a.m. wasn't her.
So if that 8:43 a.m. figure wasn't Sneha, then she could have been harmed earlier, maybe even inside the apartment after returning from shopping.
Precisely. It widens the window for foul play considerably. And this is why the initial investigation was so incredibly complex for the NYPD. Their job is to find evidence, a body, a crime scene, a witness.
But then 9/11 happens.
Right. Suddenly thousands of people are missing. The entire city is traumatized. But for Sneha specifically, you had this lack of immediate physical evidence linking her to the towers, plus this backdrop of personal turmoil that provided motive for these other theories. So they had to investigate her life, her circumstances thoroughly.
Okay. Let's shift then to the other main narrative, the one that eventually won out, legally speaking, the heroic theory.
Yes. This is the theory that resonates most strongly with many people and certainly with her family. It posits that Sneha, being a doctor, saw the catastrophe unfolding just blocks from her home.
The first plane hitting at 8:46 a.m.
Exactly. And that her immediate instinct, driven by her medical training, was to run towards the disaster zone to help the injured.
It fits the profile of a physician, doesn't it? The instinct to respond to a mass casualty event.
It absolutely aligns with that professional identity, that oath to help. Her apartment was so close, she would have seen or heard the impact, seen the smoke pouring out. The idea that she would rush towards the danger to offer aid rather than flee feels very consistent with who a doctor is supposed to be.
And let's be honest, it's a much more palatable narrative in the context of 9/11. It frames her not as someone running from problems, but as a hero lost while trying to save others. That's powerful.
Incredibly powerful, emotionally. It provides meaning and honor in the face of tragedy. But, and this is where we have to be careful,
Is there any actual evidence for it?
that's the crux. Is there any eyewitness who saw her running towards the towers? Any security footage? Any communication from her saying that's what she was doing? The answer is no. There's no concrete proof.
So this theory relies entirely on probability, on what a doctor might do in that situation, given her location.
Exactly. It's based on circumstantial probability derived from her profession and her proximity. It's a logical inference, perhaps even a likely one, but it's not based on confirmed fact.
This complexity, these competing narratives, it's why her case remains so fascinating, isn't it? It really forces you, the listener, to think about how personal stories get tangled up in huge historical events.
It really does. Her story is almost a perfect, tragic symbol of unresolved loss in the shadow of 9/11. It sits right at that crossroads. Was her death a direct result of the terrorist attacks? Or did the attack simply obliterate the evidence of a tragedy that was already unfolding for personal reasons?
And people project onto that ambiguity, don't they?
Absolutely. You can project your desire for heroism, for certainty, onto her story. Or you can see it as a cautionary tale about how personal struggles can lead someone to vanish. It highlights that deep human need we all have for clear answers, for a neat ending, especially when dealing with something as massive and chaotic as 9/11. But the facts here, they just don't offer that neatness.
That gap between the narrative we might want and the facts we actually have, that's crucial as we look at the legal battle that followed. Her case really throws a spotlight on just how difficult it was to determine who was officially a victim of 9/11, especially when there was no body, no physical proof.
Yeah, the bureaucracy involved in processing the losses from 9/11 was just unprecedented. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, OCME, in New York City, had a specific clinical standard. They needed forensic evidence.
Remains, DNA, personal items found at the site.
Exactly. Something tangible to link a specific person to the event. And when they didn't have that for Sneha, despite her proximity, it created this huge conflict, an ethical dilemma, an administrative one.
Which led to their initial decision in 2004. What was that?
In 2004, the OCME officially removed Dr. Sneha Philip's name from the list of 9/11 victims.
Wow, that must have been devastating for her family. What was the ME's reasoning?
It was strictly clinical. They argued that while her apartment was close, proximity alone wasn't proof of death at the site due to the attacks. The complete absence of any remains, any belongings, any confirmed sighting of her at ground zero. It suggested to them that her death, if she had died, might not have been directly caused by the tower collapses.
They were essentially leaving the door open to those other possibilities: voluntary disappearance, foul play, dying elsewhere.
Implicitly, yes. By requiring absolute physical proof linked to the site, they were saying they couldn't rule out other scenarios based solely on her last known whereabouts hours earlier or her unconfirmed presence nearby minutes before. Their standard was forensic certainty.
So they put the burden of proof incredibly high, basically saying, we sympathize, but without physical evidence from the site, we can't officially link her death to this event.
That's pretty much it. And this decision wasn't just symbolic. It had real-world consequences.
Like access to compensation funds?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Being officially recognized as a 9/11 victim was often necessary for families to access support from things like the Victim Compensation Fund, VCF. So for the family, this denial was about more than just recognition. It affected financial and emotional closure, which explains why they fought back so hard.
They didn't accept the ME's decision. They took legal action.
They did. They launched a determined legal challenge to get the ruling overturned. This led to the significant appeals court decision in 2008.
The New York State Supreme Court's appellate division. They reversed the medical examiner's decision. How? What legal standard did they use?
They shifted the standard. Instead of demanding absolute forensic proof, the court applied a standard of high probability.
High probability, okay.
They looked at the totality of the circumstances, her apartment's location just blocks away, her profession as a doctor trained to help, the sheer chaos of the event, and importantly, they assessed the improbability of the alternative theories.
So they weighed the likelihoods.
Essentially, yes. The court concluded that considering everything, it was highly probable that she did die in the attacks. They acknowledged the lack of physical evidence, but decided the circumstantial evidence was compelling enough, especially given the unique evidence-destroying nature of the event itself.
And they addressed the other theories directly in their ruling.
They did, quite forcefully.
Yeah.
The majority opinion stated that the evidence made it highly probable she perished at the World Trade Center site. And then, crucially, they dismissed the alternatives, voluntary disappearance, criminal foul play, by saying that Only the rankest speculation leads to any other conclusion.
Only the rankest speculation.
Wow. Yeah.
That's the court basically saying, look, we see the personal issues, but the odds of her successfully vanishing without a trace or being the victim of a random crime right before the towers were hit are just too low compared to the likelihood she responded as a doctor to the biggest disaster unfolding outside her window.
That's a good summary. It's a pragmatic judgment. It prioritizes what seemed most likely, given the location and timing, and it provides that crucial legal closure. It acknowledges the circumstantial case. She lived there, she was likely home just before, she had the skills and likely the disposition to help. The other scenarios, while not impossible, were deemed too speculative to overcome that.
It gave the family the official recognition they sought, but, and this is the core of why we're still talking about it, it didn't change the underlying facts, or lack thereof.
It absolutely didn't. The legal truth was established, but the factual mystery persists. Dr. Sneha Philip remains the only officially recognized 9/11 victim for whom absolutely no physical trace, no remains, no personal effects has ever been recovered, and for whom there is no undisputed eyewitness testimony placing her definitively at ground zero during the attacks or their immediate aftermath.
That single fact is just staggering. The only one out of nearly 3,000 victims.
It makes her case unique and keeps that ambiguity alive. The legal resolution exists alongside this profound factual uncertainty.
And you still see people online, digital sleuth, trying to enhance that 8.43 a.m. lobby footage, right? Trying to use AI or new tech to get a clearer picture, to finally say yes or no if that was her. Why do you think we collectively cling to these small, maybe unresolvable details years later?
Well, I think it's partly because that ambiguity allows us to engage with the story on different levels. The factual details we do have, the lingerie purchase, the 4 a.m. call, that fleeting figure at 8.43 a.m., they hint at a complex human story happening right before the catastrophe.
They make her real, not just a statistic.
Exactly. And if you entertain the possibility she ran away, it adds this complicated layer of personal agency, maybe even darkness, to the broader 911 narrative. If you accept the court's ruling, she becomes purely a symbol of selfless heroism. That tension is compelling.
So trying to solve the factual mystery is also about trying to decide which narrative feels true.
I think so. We're drawn to the puzzle. We want to reconcile the troubled woman described in some reports with a potential hero commemorated at the memorial. The ongoing fascination, the digital digging, it shows we're still grappling with that, still trying to find certainty where maybe none exists.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that beneath the massive shared historical trauma of 9/11, there are these intensely personal mysteries. And some, like Sneha's, might just remain mysteries, forever buried in the rubble and the confusion of that day.
Indeed. Her story forces us to think about that line between duty and desperation, between running towards a crisis and running away from one.
Yeah.
We absolutely should honor the compassion she likely had and respect the closure her family fought so hard to achieve through the legal system.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that the cold, hard facts, well, they're still whispering different possibilities from the shadows of that morning.
That's a really important distinction to hold on to. Thank you for walking us through this incredibly complex and sensitive case.
It was important to discuss.
That brings us to the end of today's exploration into the confounding disappearance of Dr. Sneha Philip. It's a case that truly underscores the depth of loss from 9/11, but also the persistent, haunting mysteries that remain hidden within the larger tragedy, leaving us always wondering if the legal truth and the factual truth can ever fully align. Next time on Threads of Truth, we look at the haunting story of Patricia Meehan, the woman who vanished after a car crash, only to be seen dozens of times across America. Who was she running from, and why?